All right, let's welcome everybody back to a brand new episode of the Let's Talk Local podcast. My name is Chris Hollifield. I am your host. Welcome to my show, everybody. Thank you so much for coming back week after week. Welcome to the new listeners. Those of you that are just downloading the podcast for the very first time, make sure to hit that subscribe button or follow button, whatever kind of podcast app you're listening to this in. That way you get every episode sent directly to your phone when I come out with a new episode. Seriously, the love I feel from each and every one of you, I cannot thank you enough. Those of you that have been sharing the podcast on social media, you've been telling your family and friends, as I've morphed over from I Am Salt Lake into Let's Talk Local. It's been great to have all my old listeners back, and those of you that have been here over the last, 11 years of doing this podcast. So I can't thank you enough. I love the messages. I love the comments. I love interacting with each and every one of you. Hey, before we get into this episode, though, of course, I got to mention the show sponsor. Love these guys. It's the Red Sign Real Estate Team. It's actually the real estate team that I'm on. So remember, if you're moving to Utah, if you're moving across town, hit up the Red Sign Real Estate Team. Hit me up. I'd love to answer any of your real estate related questions. You can also go to chris.redsign.com. That is my website if you are searching for homes here in the state of Utah. Again, that is chris.redsign.com. And so support the Red Sign Real Estate Team, and you are directly supporting this podcast. I have a really, this is a good episode, you guys. I mean, all the episodes, of course, that I record are good, but this was, one that I believe is an important topic to talk about. I had Michael Vanderplas on this episode of the podcast. Wow, what an amazing conversation. And I don't even know how to properly introduce this episode. We talked a lot about his book that he just recently wrote called Stay Strong, Overcome Suicidal Thoughts and Live the Life You Always Wanted. I think each and every one of us could benefit and learn something from this book. We should all get about 10 copies and give them out to people, gift them. Christmas is right around the corner. Make good gifts. Let me read Michael's bio, though, here. I think this would probably be a better way to introduce this show, just by reading Michael Vanderplas's bio to kind of let you know a little bit about the guest on today's podcast. So Michael is Michael Vanderplas, RN, BSN, CCRN. Michael is a complete healer. As an ICU and psychiatric nurse for 17 plus years, Michael has been in more life and death situations than most. He has saved numerous lives and has been present during the last moments of others. This has given him a great perspective on the holistic healer's total life spectrum. His coaching and training have taken him to 8 countries and featured on ABC, NBC, and USB TV news. His large body matches the enormous love and acceptance he demonstrates to others. This love and passion for what he does have led him to travel over 1 million miles. He has learned from the world's best minds and lectures at various colleges, universities, and business. Michael radically changes lives in a brief period. Join Michael and create the life you always wanted. He is an international master trainer of NLP, quantum timeline therapy, and hypnosis, has delivered trainings in English, Portuguese, and Spanish to thousands of students that he calls friends. He currently resides with his wife and daughter in their home at the foot of the Rocky Mountains here in Salt Lake City, yet enjoys traveling and guest speaking and sharing his message of hope and strength to large and small audience alike. Yeah, I know I don't normally read those on the podcast, but I felt like Michael deserved a proper introduction so each and every one of you can know the awesomeness of Michael. I mean, this is such a great conversation. Like I said, we talk a lot about his book, Stay Strong, which I can't urge you, each and every one of you, to get a copy. Order a copy, support Michael, send him a message, and let him know you heard him on this podcast. But enough of my jibber jabber. Let's jump into this conversation that I had with him. Enjoy. Why do you think talking about suicide is such a taboo thing. Because especially with the numbers like that, people, we've all, a majority of us had dealt with it.
Oh, everybody knows someone or they themselves have thought about suicide. I've done presentations, I've done trainings throughout the U.S., through some other countries as well. And always I have somebody who comes up and says, I have this family member who's thinking, I have this family member who did, had this good friend that did. Everyone thinks about it. And so I think the reason why it's taboo is, I might just riff on a few different ideas. One of the biggest things is it's dealing with death.
Yeah.
And so death is not the easiest subject for a lot of people, which is interesting for me because every single one of us is going to do it. Like,
is going to die.
Everyone's going to die.
Yeah.
Like I've worked in ICUs for years, and I've had to explain sometimes to family members, and I say this in a kind way, so don't think that I'm mocking them, but there's some people who aren't ready for their family member's death, and I've had to say, hey, like, this is a natural part of life. You know, everyone's going to die. Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha all did. You know, in some beliefs, one or more of those have returned, you know, in one way or another. But we all die. Even the gods that we worship die. But it's something that's kind of taboo. And I think part of it is because there's this fear of that person leaving. I think the taboo in relation to suicide is it's looked down on as the person's weak who's considering suicide. And so I think that's a part of it. I think another big part of it is people, and this is why I do speak about it, people are so afraid that if they learn something about suicide and they try to help somebody with suicidal thoughts and that person passes away, that person decides to take their own life, that weight will be on their shoulders. And so I think some people would rather have it as a thing not seen, kind of push it away. Oh, my kid is thinking about suicide. I think they're thinking about suicide, but I don't know how to ask them. Because if I ask them, I might trigger them to go towards it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a part of what it is. And see, that's kind of what I'm trying to raise awareness to and about is, hey, there's some simple little tips to notice populations of people, you know, people in this area of the country or the world who are thinking about it this time of the year, which is a time of the year that a lot of people don't think, which is actually late spring to early summer is when more people commit suicide than during the dark days of winter near the holidays, which we're always taught.
Why do you think that is?
Is it A.A. Millie who wrote this, who said, no, it was T.S. Eliot. And I actually have this quote in the book that it says, spring is the harshest moment or something like that, something along those lines. Can't remember it word for word, but basically the reason why that era is more difficult is because we always see the long, dark nights of winter. And so we had this hunkering down. It's a period of time during the winter where people are hibernating emotionally a little bit as well.
Okay.
When the spring comes, there's two aspects to it that some scientists, some researchers have figured out of why they believe it's in that late spring, early summer. One is tied to physiological changes that happen in us. There's more pollens, there's more pollination out there. Allergies go up. With the allergies going up, it releases more histamine in the system, which blocks some neuromediators, some stuff like the serotonin and dopamine receptors. So it blocks those serotonin and dopamine receptors. The person increases in anxiety and depression, which are very closely tied to suicide. So that's one of the physical reasons why. Another one of the physical reasons why is because people are getting outside more.
Yeah.
So they're doing more physical action. So the physical action of committing suicide, of whichever method that person is considering taking, men doing more drastic, violent forms of suicide, females doing more passive forms of suicide. The person's been outside doing more actions, physical actions, to where their body is more willing to take on the physical action of ending themselves. Now, the interesting thing, the psychological aspect behind why it's suspected, why people consider suicide more during that time period, is that this one psychologist says that what it is they've had that long, dark night. And the spring is coming. So we have the spring fever, where we're excited. We're looking for mates. We're looking for hanging out with friends. We're going to work out more, and we're going to get fit. And
you're going to get that summer body.
You're going to get that summer body. It's the actual true new year.
Yeah.
Like the new year isn't really in January. The new year, we always see it as spring. I mean, that's how the world has always seen it for thousands of years, all of our ancestors. So when they see that coming, but then for some people, it doesn't change. That hope, that aspiration of, hey, for me, as an example, hey, I'm going to ask that girl out. I'm going to ask, Becky out. My wife's Sita, so no, honey, I'm not really asking someone out. But like, you think, hey, I'm going to ask Becky out. And then it doesn't work out with Becky because she's hanging out with John.
Crushes you, man.
It crushes you. And you realize this is going to be another full year of me living in my own personal hell. I might as well just end it now. And so that's the estimation and the reason why they think some people commit suicide at that point in time, why the numbers are higher there.
I want to get into this book that you wrote called Stay Strong.
Yeah.
But before we do that, I want to find out, to kind of, even for listeners, because I'm sure a lot of people, they're unfamiliar who you are, they're familiar. When did like this whole journey even start for you, man? Like have you always been, before you, because how long ago did you write this book?
I wrote it about a year and a half ago.
Okay. But you've been an advocate for suicide, like you know what I mean? Like talking about it, helping people for a while.
Yeah.
How long?
So I'm 50.
Okay. So your whole life, really, probably.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I didn't realize this until about 2 years ago. I was giving a presentation that I've been doing this since I was about 16.
Okay.
So when I was 16 years old, I was part of a peer support group at my high school for 2 years. You had to apply to get into it. It was during a class period. So it was a credited class period. You got into this group. Usually it was all seniors, but they allowed 2 juniors every year, kind of like people to come in. I was one of the juniors that got into it, and then I was in it as a senior. And it was a peer support group. We'd go around to junior high schools. We'd go around to other high schools, and we'd speak at our high school in regards to substance abuse and suicide. So we were peer counselors. When there was a suicide in the county, they would bring us in to speak with our peers as counselors. Now, not professional licensed therapists in that way, but just kind of communicating. So we started learning these techniques. And it's funny because I'd forgotten about that for a long time. Grew up in Utah, went on a mission to Brazil, came home, started my life, worked in logistics for a while. And then I decided around, close to 22, 23 years ago to become a nurse. And I got into nursing and started taking care of patients, quickly got into ICU, did most of my career in ICU, but I'd always pick up shifts in psych floors, always picking up shifts in different psych floors. And then I'd get a lot of patients that would come into the ICU who would be there for suicidal attempt, overdosing, gunshot wound, different things. And so I'd have to deal with the family members. I'd have to deal with the patients. And so I'd see them in different ways. And then with this book, the way that this book kind of came around is about 4 years ago, 2019, I was working at an adolescent psychiatric unit. So there's 2 different adolescent units, and I worked on both of them. One of them was long-term care. So the kids were there for months, sometimes maybe up to a year.
Wow.
A lot of those kids were from out of state.
Yeah.
And this was their last resort. It was like a prison. Literally, it was to keep them out of adult prison as an adolescent. So a lot of these kids had done a lot of juvie time. A lot of them had suicidal ideations, a lot of problems. The other was what we would call an acute setting. And so those are kids who were there for a few days, maybe a few weeks, maybe a month. And a lot of those kids, most of those kids, had suicidal ideations. And so, or a suicide attempt. They'd come in after being in an acute hospital, in an ICU, in a med-surg, something like that. So what I realized is we'd always have to do this evaluation scale with them when they come in. It's called the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, the CSSRS. And there's a series of questions that you need to ask on it in order to understand the adolescents. Well, I changed the wording on some of those questions around a little bit because I don't really like the question why.
Yeah.
Why usually gives people an excuse. It gives somebody a chicken exit.
Yeah.
A way to get out of answering what's really going on in their mind without them even realizing. When we change the wording around for what purpose, so instead of me saying, why do you like doing a podcast? I might ask you, for what purpose do you do a podcast? It makes you think of like the logical reason of why you do it. And so I started asking these kids, for what purpose did you want to commit suicide? It's the last question on the test, on this rating scale. And I started getting answers that were similar, and it helped me with all the other things that I've read, all the other research that I've done over the years, all the different therapists, psychologists that I've spoken with. And it just kind of kicked into my mind a theory as to what is the unconscious driver of why people commit suicide. And it took a while to define it, but then I would share this with the kids while we were doing the intake. So instead of the intake of them coming into the hospital being a half an hour long, I'd spend an hour and 15. And I started drawing like the same diagrams and, hey, this means this means this, just kind of to help, to where I had some of my coworkers who would start saying to me, hey, Mike, can you do this intake? You do so well with these kids, who are suicidal. And in that first conversation with them, where I'd explained to them why their mind was thinking that way, it helped them out. Well, come a few months later, there's this big thing that happened throughout the world in 2020.
I remember that time.
Yeah, where, it was really good for us hospital workers to drive for a while when everybody was staying home and stuff.
Yeah.
And so we were doing that stuff, and my friends who were doing ICU, they're like, hey, what are you doing? It's a waste of talent, you doing psych nursing. You should be out here doing ICU, because I'm a pretty good ICU nurse. And so I got into ICU nursing for 2 years, back into ICU nursing during COVID, started doing travel nursing throughout the country, went to a few different states, did some contracts here in Utah as well. But as I was writing it, as I was doing those contracts, this thought kept on kicking in my mind. If I don't get this information out there to people, more people will die.
Sure.
And so it started driving me, and I found a book writing coach, and
you wrote the book.
And I wrote the book. And so I have some friends who say, how long did it take you to write the book? And I say, it's kind of the same idea as Picasso when somebody had him draw really quickly on a napkin.
Yeah.
And he's like, $10,000. And the person's like, oh, it took you 5 minutes. He's like, it took me 60 years. And so that's the same thing I say with the book is, it took me 20, 30 years to write, but the sitting down writing it part took me about 3-4 months. And it evolved into something different than what I thought it was. And when COVID was kind of coming to an end in the acute stages in the hospitals, when my contract was finishing up, I met the CEO of the place that I'm working at now, which is a psych hospital up in Salt Lake City. And he asked me if I could go out there. And so I went out there, and I work now with military guys dealing with PTSD And it's the most rewarding job of my entire career, which is saying a lot. I've been around for 20 years and done a lot of nursing jobs. And it's by far the most rewarding job I've had. And a lot of those guys have suicidal ideations as well. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, we need people like you, man.
Thanks, bro.
Like, seriously, it's especially dealing with the military. Thank you for doing that, because it's important, because a lot of them, you know, they had such good intentions to serve our country.
Yeah.
And do this, and then they get then this long-term trauma.
Oh, yeah.
That they have to deal with. And if they don't have an outlet or somebody to talk to, somebody to work through it, and then to even offer books, like you wrote, it goes back to the beginning comment of why is it such a taboo thing? Because I know firsthand myself, if I didn't have people to talk to and talk through my issues and my problems and my moments of depression, my moments of anxiety, you know, even as simple as my own mother, it's nice to just have, and a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have that.
A lot of people don't have that.
And we need it.
See, with these guys that I work with, the patients that come in military, there's a lot of them where their suicidal ideations, their PTSD, their depression, their anxiety, some of it's from the military. Some of it's, a lot of people get into the military to get away from the rough life they've had. So some of this stuff is young. So some of those people don't have a mom or a dad. And now that I'm 50 years old, I used to look more like Thor. I'm looking more like Odin now with this gray beard and stuff. That I get to act a little bit like these guys' dads. And some of these guys, I'm only like 3 years older than them. Some of these guys, they could be my son, you know, but get to sit down and just wait there to talk to them some. But the most important thing, and this is something for the people who are listening out there, who are afraid that they're going to say the wrong thing to somebody they love. No, you're not. If it's said with love, if it's said with a positive intention, with love behind it, they might say something, they might argue or something like that. But if you're trying and you put yourself on the back burner and try and give the attention to them, it's going to be received. And so that's the most important thing, is to say something. In the military, like the Air Force, because they're not boots on the ground, they're more up in the air, you know, in battle things. Suicide is the largest killer in the Air Force. Had 122 deaths last year.
Wow.
And the Air Force has this really cool thing where they say, just ask. I can't remember the exact terminology, but it's something along those lines of just ask. So you ask somebody, hey man, what are you thinking? Are you thinking about suicide? Yeah. Okay. So why are you doing that? Or for what purpose do you think of that? What's going on? What's wrong in life? Just talking, even if the person says, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, maybe they don't, because they know that they're going to have to go through some crap in order to clean that out. And they know that's heavy lifting and that's the hard work. But just asking the people, if you do it with love, it will be received. Every single one of those patients that comes through there, I let them know that I love them. And I've received countless notes from these guys when they're leaving who say, and I'm not taking away from the therapists. The therapists are fantastic. They do a lot more of the heavy lifting than I do. But I sit there at night, I hand out pills, and I sit there waiting to talk to them. And these guys show up, and I just talk to them. But I'm talking to them with love. And so they know that I care about them. So if people are willing to take away that taboo, like you said, and kind of put it off to the side and put their own fear off to the side and be courageous. Come with a story from your heart, as Brene Brown says, with, you know, the root of the word courage being core, being the Latin base of the word heart, you know, coming with courage and just talking to the person with love and with the intention of listening to them as well. We so often try and talk to other people with this intention of waiting for you to finish talking so that I can say what I want to. But when we talk and we're listening to them and we're like, so what do you mean by that? Yeah. Like some of the best lines, if I can just share this super quick.
Please do. Please.
Some of the best lines to get more answers out of people are these. Write these down. If you're going to do something at home, get your notepad. If you're at home listening to this, these are some of the greatest things to help get more information from someone. Okay. So you've asked a question or the person's talking to you. Here are the lines. Really? What else? Okay. And that last one is just silence.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous how much people will tell you when you shut the hell up and just listen. There's so many times where I want to say things to people and I'm just about to say it. And then I stop and think, okay, am I saying this just because of my ego that I want to say it? Or is this going to help this person? And I just shut up and I let them talk more because people will always share information. Sometimes they're closed for a little bit, and that's fine. If your kid doesn't want to talk to you at all, in no way they want to talk to you, fine. Sit in a room with them. Tell them, hey, I can't have you just hanging out in your room. You got to hang out here in the living room with us, with the family. You don't need to talk. You don't need to participate. Fine. And then while they're sitting on their phone and you're sitting on your phone, you kind of have the phone and you have it up looking at them, pretending like you're looking at your phone, but look at the way they breathe. Count their breaths. Follow their breaths.
It's a way to connect.
It's a form of connection. I mean, Tony Robbins talks about this. Some people think he's a hack. I think he's a genius.
Oh, I love Tony Robbins.
I think he's a genius. You can think he's a hack, but the guy gets results. He talks about this, that, he has a thing for people who are having problems in marriages. He's like, okay, if you're having a problem in marriage, I want you to go do what married couples do for an hour, and you have to match each other's breaths for that hour. If that doesn't bring you closer together, then you can talk to me. Because the breathing tuning into someone else's breath is a very intimate, visceral way of connecting with that person. I don't know exactly how it is. I've got some suspicions, some estimations of why it happens, but I've done it in the medical setting with people who are anxious, with people who are in respiratory distress. I did it on a medical emergency on a flight down to Brazil one time. I matched the person's breathing, and then you start calming it down. And so just match your family member's breathing. Send them a quick little message on a text. Hey, Bill, I love you. Proud of you.
Not enough people say that anymore, man.
Dude,
and that's why I'm sure it's a powerful thing when you tell people that, because a lot of people probably never even heard that for years.
Yeah.
That somebody else loves them.
I tell these guys, guys aren't supposed to be the lovey-dovey. We're supposed to be.
We need to get rid of that.
Dude, it's gone. I don't care. I know how big I am. I'm 6'4". I weigh 260 right now. I'm a big dude. Got long hair, beard. I look like a lumberjack. And I tell these guys, I'm like, hey man, I effing love you. I love you, bro. I'll see the guys just walking by and I'll say, hey, Sam, whatever. I think we haven't had one Sam, so that's really good.
Yeah.
But like we call someone over and I'll be like, hey Sam, come here real quick. I just got to tell you something. Yeah, what's up? I just put a fist out for a fist bump. I was like, you're a good man. Giving compliments, just the littlest thing.
Words of affirmation, man. Like, dude, I'm a big believer in words of affirmation.
Yeah. So those things help people when they're having suicidal thoughts. They might go back. They might not, but they might go back to, hey, this person that I admire said something nice about me. Maybe I'm not complete crap.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not worthless. Maybe I'm not, not worth living.
Sure.
Maybe I do have value. And so sometimes it's those teeny little lines. Maybe it's a line of a song, something like that that can tie in. And so say something, get past that taboo. I'm really glad you asked that question. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, I guess it was there in the mind, but I hadn't thought about it until you asked that question. And that's a really good question that you asked. I appreciate that.
This book you wrote, Stay Strong, Overcome Suicidal Thoughts and Get the Life You Always Wanted.
Yeah.
People can get it now currently. It's on Amazon.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. I have it in English, Portuguese, and Spanish.
Can any local bookstores have it here in Utah?
I don't have it in local bookstores. Okay. I haven't pushed for it. When I released the book, the day that I released the book was the day after my wife's first round of chemo.
Okay.
She had to go through chemo for about a year, close to a year. And so it's just about now that I'm starting to kind of promote it some. So you can get it there. You could also go to staystrongbook.com. In fact, if you do staystrongbook.com/for-Utah,
okay, the
person can get a free chapter of the book. You can, if you don't want to purchase it, please pick up chapter 2. It's the chapter that gives people information on signs and symptoms to notice in a loved one that they're considering suicide. And so that's a very valuable chapter. I had one former coworker, who had picked up the book. She read through about a chapter and a half in regards to stress about her sister possibly considering suicide. The sister started acting a lot better, a lot happier, started stopping by, visiting family members, was chipper, cheerful, happy, started giving away meaningful gifts, like, hey, when mom gave me this thing, I thought you should have it. And so she thought that oh, she's doing better. That is a huge sign, possibly the biggest sign that somebody is thinking of the immediate of killing themselves. And her sister killed herself. And then she picked up the book, read 2 pages later, and read that. And so even if you don't buy the book, you can pick up the book there as well for just shipping and handling. It's cheaper than on Amazon there. But if you don't pick up the book, at least just go to staystrongbook.com/for-Utah. That's the number 4, sorry. And just get chapter 2.
Just get the whole book.
Just get the whole book.
So let's talk about the book here, because I haven't even read it yet, for listeners' sake.
No worries.
What are you going to find in the book, man? Like, what kind of information? It's a decent sized book. There's a lot to read here. There's a lot to learn. What's the book about?
So first I'll just say this. Today, right before I got here, I actually finished recording the last chapter of the audiobooks. So
it'll be available like on Audible here soon.
Yeah, hopefully by the time you put up this podcast.
With your voice.
With my beautiful, sultry voice.
So if you like Michael's voice now, then you're ready to go.
So what it has in it, chapter 1, I sometimes forget the order of some of the chapters.
No, it's good, man. But
chapter 1 basically just talks really briefly about the problem. So it talks about numbers, how many people are thinking about it, how many people do, what the cost is financially, and some of those numbers. Chapter 2 talks a lot about signs and symptoms, patient populations who are thinking about it, time of the year. Chapters 3 and 4 get into the theory of the unconscious mind, the unconscious reason of why people consider suicide. Some of that involves how the brain works, why the brain works the way it does, especially in relation to hunter-gatherer survivalism and stuff like that, why our brain goes there. It's natural for our brains to go into a negative mode.
Sure.
So I explain about that. Chapter 5, I forget some of the stuff.
No.
But basically talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Chapter 7 is my favorite chapter that I wrote. It was actually the last out of the 9 chapters. It was the last chapter that I wrote. And that talks about having a purpose. Chapter 9 speaks somewhat about that. Chapter 8 talks about simple techniques to help people get over negative emotions when they're in the what I call the I am enough stage. So just barely getting by stage, the I'm about ready to take my own life stage. A few techniques to help people start feeling a bit more positive. And yeah, the conclusion's a kicker. I actually have to record the conclusion today, and I'm probably going to be crying when I read it, because I always do. And it's not crying because of a sad thing. It's crying because of a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of friends who have read it who said, as I was reading this, I could hear your voice saying this, encouraging me. And so it's got good information for people. And I'm not saying that like trying to get rich off the sell of the book. I get what, like $1.25 maybe.
Rolling in the big Benjamins at this one.
But I know how many people this has helped, and I want it to help more people.
How was it? I mean, when you got this book in the mail, like shipped to you from the publisher for the first time, and you held it in your hands, and you were like, I'm an author now. Like I have a published book. I mean, it had to be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, I felt pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It got international bestseller in 4 different subjects the first week that it was out.
That's incredible.
I'll be honest, I just felt super proud. I was thinking, gosh, this is going to sell millions of copies, and I'm going to become a millionaire, and I'm never going to have to work again. I just won the lottery.
Sure.
So there's some of that went on.
Well, we all have that hope, right?
Yeah, we all have that hope. But since then, it's turned away from that so much to where it's just very rewarding to know that when I'm talking to somebody and they're thinking about it, I can just reference a part of the book. Be like, oh yeah, I talk about that actually in chapter 3 of my book.
Yeah.
And then that gives authority to me to where the person's willing to listen. And then I can help. And then I can ask them questions about their family member or them, what they're thinking. And so the book helps me more. For me, as the author, it helps to give me authority to where I can help more people. And if you don't mind me saying this, we talked about this a little bit before we hit record button, is, the U.S. military some people have heard of it. And in the month of September, which is Suicide Awareness Month, some military people in Germany are flying me out there to speak at 5 different military bases, be on a live radio show out there as well.
Because of your book?
Because of the book.
See, that's incredible. Yeah. I mean, you open up these doors because of your book.
Yeah. And so I was just on, Good Things Utah last Monday.
Which was great, by the way. I got to catch that.
To see that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Second time I was on there. I've got another podcast that I'm doing with somebody via Zoom on Wednesday. I've been on about 4 other podcasts.
There you go.
And so the opportunities are coming around to speak more about this. And if I can help out in some way, then I help out.
And maybe it'll open up more doors. And I mean, we were even talking about, hey, you need to start a podcast yourself and all of this. And the thing is maybe this book isn't going to make your millions, but it's going to open the doors, and you're going to be able to focus more on helping people with suicide. Not that your job is, but maybe it'll open up more possibilities to really go where your passion is.
There's a lot of things that are opening up for me.
Yeah.
I've gotten letters of recommendation. Some of the guys that I've taken care of have asked, they're like, Mike, could I promote you to my base? Yeah. I mean, there's some, and I said, yeah, there's some Navy guys who have actually said, I want you to talk with this admiral about this. And some of them have given me letters of recommendation, without me even asking, to go and speak at more places. I'm really hoping that I can speak at more churches, schools, high school, college levels. If you guys are...
Oh, we need you at high schools, man. High schools is rough these days, man, for kids.
Absolutely. I'm actually going down to Georgia in a few months to speak with a district down there, to speak at a few different high schools down there. Have a friend who works for a high school down there as a teacher. And so if you guys want me to come out to your schools, do that.
People can hit you up if they want you to come speak and come talk. I mean, obviously here in Utah is better, because it's close for you.
Yeah, exactly. So I love traveling too.
Sure.
Like I travel out and, I just want to get it out there. I've spoken at different church groups already, on the subject. I've been called in. And
you know what you need to start is and I mean, this just came to my mind. Maybe it's not a great idea, but it would seem like, and I'm sure they're a group, like a Facebook group.
Yeah.
Where we can go and even have support ourselves.
That's a great idea. Cause I was thinking about, starting through the month of September. I'm really busy. I'm going to be gone for, 15, 16 days in Germany. There's 2 military bases out here in Utah that are considering having me out. They just haven't set the dates, and I still need to work a little bit to make some money.
Sure.
To pay the bills too.
Of course.
But in October, my plan is to do a rotating 4-week webinar on 4 different aspects of suicide awareness, suicide prevention.
Please let me, I would like to attend these, be like, check them out. And then obviously I can promote them to the listeners of the show.
That, man.
To be like, hey, you remember when Michael was on the podcast? Let's go support him, because right now I do have the I Am Salt Lake community Facebook group, which I don't know if you're part of that, which you should definitely join, Michael.
I don't know.
And I try to promote previous guests of this podcast in that group. And we have about 2,300 people in there right now.
Nice.
And, we all try to support each other. And that's one thing I want with this podcast is let's everybody that's listening, let's go support Michael. Let's get this book. And even if there's got to be even somebody to gift it to.
Oh, absolutely.
Buy a couple and give it to a neighbor.
I've had some people say, hey, I bought a copy for this person.
Sure.
Hey, I bought 10 copies.
Yeah.
And there was a suicide last winter. I think it was right before Christmas, at a military base. We'll just keep it random like that here in Utah. And I knew a guy who was in command of some people, and I think he bought like 20 copies.
Yeah.
I knew his wife because I used to work with her. Fantastic nurse, amazing lady. And the guy just said, hey, can I buy some copies? And bought the copies, went out there, signed them, gave them to him. And, So
that is awesome. I mean, do you want to write more books? Do you have any plans to write more books?
Yeah. So I've recently was published. There was somebody who had a compilation book. And so I recently, donated, 2 chapters to that book. And there's another one that's coming out in a few months. And that has 1 chapter of the book. Those are reduced, highly edited down versions of some chapters that I wrote that I'm going to utilize in the next book that's about halfway done right now. And that book is going to be called Beyond Valor, Healing the Silent Operator.
Okay.
And that's geared more towards military guys. The silent operator deals with 2 different ideas. One is in the military, the guys who are special forces who get the job done well, they like to consider themselves silent operators. They're not the guys who are out there boasting, saying, hey, we're the badasses, we're the cool guys that get all this crap done. It's just the guys who are good technique, get it done. The other aspect of the silent operator is some people remain silent until they pass away. And so that book is more geared straight towards the military, with some of the military mindset, with some of the mindset more towards men and suicide. I don't want people to think that I'm only focusing in on men. Women attempt suicide 6 times more than men. Men
don't talk about it as a problem. Men, because we're so tough and we're men. So we can't talk about that. But women, They're a little more open.
They talk more about it. They attempt suicide 6 times more than men, but men commit suicide, die from suicide 3.63 times more than women.
Because I know how to people. Chris, get thicker skin. Chris, get tougher. Oh gosh, I am trying here.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about resilience and building strength. And building resilience. And you need to be conscious of, is this the moment to ask for that person to be resilient? Or is it the moment to listen to them? There's safer populations for guys to speak to. Who are the people that they would feel more secure with speaking with? A lot of times it's people who relate closely to them in their work, in the same form of employment that they're in, or the same groups that they're in. Just because they relate closer to those guys. It's usually easier for a guy to open up to another guy than it is to a female. There's reasonings behind that. Some of it is because the guys are afraid that the woman will see them as weak and leave them. And so there's those ideas. And, you might say, well, that's unwarranted. Cool. But if the person feels that it's warranted, it's not going to make any difference if it's true or not. Yeah. That's what they think. So there's some pointers in there already about okay, these are kind of some of the people that maybe you should look to talk to. So yeah, that's the next book that I'm working on. There's a doctorate of nursing practice therapist up in Salt Lake who I used to work with, and we're planning on working on a book together starting November, December, and gearing that towards PTSD with people who are in the service industry, such as ambulance workers, hospital employees, police, and firemen, kind of more towards that grouping of people and PTSD that they encounter due to the patients and the people they serve and the rough things they see. So yeah, there's plenty more books on the way. Sure.
It's just not enough time in the day to write them, I bet. And then with your, a day job on top of it, it probably keeps you. What do you know? I mean, this is just, I want to ask this for the sake of listeners. I mean, just book publishing in general. Let's just talk about that for a second. What do you know now? I mean, I'm sure you had to learn a lot about public because this is self-published, right?
Yeah.
So
through a small publisher. I
mean, what advice could you give somebody who might want to publish a book?
There's different book coaches. My book coach, Susana Perez.
Well, you got a book coach. That's great.
Yeah, I got her for the first one. I'm not sure how much I'm going to need her for some of the others. Maybe for promotion, she's better at that than I am by far. But she really gave me a lot of tools that I know how to utilize now for other people, for other projects.
Sure.
The biggest thing that I would say, and I hope I'm not undermining her on this, because this is her livelihood.
Well, she won't listen.
No, she loves supporting me with everything. I do. Whenever I say a podcast, she listens.
Okay, well, hello.
So she's listening in, I'm sure. Yeah. But one of the biggest things that I learned from her was basically do an outline, start writing, and know that it's going to change.
Okay.
So you hear people say this all the time. Oh, we started this book, we started this movie, we started this thing, this art project, and it just morphed into this thing that I wasn't expecting. Well, of course, we change. I don't know the ending of the book. I don't know how to write a novel. I know how to write books with research and stories along with it to help with it. But there's 4 chapters of that book that I pulled out, and I put 3 different chapters in. So I had an outline of what I thought it was going to be, and I started writing, and then I realized this doesn't fit with this book. I need to pull this out. Now those chapters are still sitting there. They could be edited, and maybe they'll show up in another book sometime. Maybe there's just ideas for my, for some conversation that I'll have. I don't know. but just start writing and
see where it leads you.
See where it leads you. Write every day while you're doing the writing process. And, there's some days where you're going to write just this mind-blowing great stuff. And you're like, gosh, how did that come out of me? And there's going to be other days where you're just going to be like, oh my gosh, I can barely write, a sentence and it's just not working. But there's always something you can write. And as you're writing, you'll have more chances of inspiration to come to you the more you do the writing. So,
well, very cool, man. I mean, there's so much we could talk about. I mean, we're almost at an hour here, and I like to keep these podcast episodes close to an hour. I mean, there's so much we could talk about, and I feel like we probably just skimmed the surface with the. So, I mean, you're working with the military.
Yeah.
Do you plan on opening up, like working with more people than just the military, or do you ever? I mean, I guess you probably do at your job. I mean,
at the hospital,
all different types of people.
Yeah, they have acute people who come in. They've got people who come in for substance abuse.
Sure.
Drugs, alcohol. For recovery with that. It's a good month-long program. Like the program I'm in, Stay Strong, is a month-long program. But we also have people who come in with acute psychotic episodes, people who come in with acute suicidal ideations, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia. And so we see all kinds of patients in that way. Me, myself, for putting in an effort outside of work, I'm focusing more towards the suicide aspect. And the reason why I'm focusing towards it is, pat on my back, just a little pat on my own back is I feel like I can take the weight of it.
Okay.
I've been in more life and death situations than any human should have to be.
Yeah.
And some of those are with people who have been considering suicide. A lot of those situations have been in ICU settings. Some of those are my patients. A lot of them are other people's patients, like when the patient is dying. And I've been in those situations. And so having been in those situations, having been in rough situations where if I don't get this medication to this person this second, they might die. And having that weight, I've gained the strength. I've gained resilience to where I'm able to take on the weight of these difficult things. And so that's why I think I'm just leaning towards this information. I mean, I do trainings and certifications for neurolinguistic programming, for hypnosis. Well,
that's right. I had some notes in here to kind of go down some of those routes, but talk about those for a minute.
So I do those things, but the suicide thing is kind of like a passion thing. And then sometimes people hear through my stuff that I do those certifications and they come around to those trainings as well. I've got a training that's coming up the end of September, just outside of Capitol Reef National Park. I've just got a few people who are into it. I don't really promote it hugely, but it's something that I love because it's healing modalities. A lot of people utilize those techniques, hypnotic language patterns. That doesn't mean we're doing the woo-woo, hypnosis, which I do that as well, with people. But language patterns that help put people into somewhat of a trance to where they pay attention to what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's nothing, they can be used in a negatively manipulative way. That's not how I focus on it. That's not how I teach it. If that's what people want to learn from me, I don't do it that way. As far as like the NLP, there's a lot of people who utilize it in business. It's huge in business. There's tons of people I've met who are in real estate. I met a former VP of the company you work for, Keller Williams.
Yeah.
And she asked me to do hypnosis on her and help her get a goal of reaching 200 million.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Well, I got to hit you up now.
Yeah. We'll talk. And it's funny. I thought she said 2 million and I was like, oh, 2 million. She's like, oh no, honey, that was decades ago. She's like, I'm just trying to get over this hump of 200 million. And I was like, yeah, we'll share names and stuff like that. She's fairly well known in Keller Williams group. I actually met Gary Keller one time. We'll talk about that.
Dude, that is awesome.
Nice guy, super nice guy. But yeah, so you can utilize these skills to help people in business, in personal communication with other people, in having influence on them. And so I ask that people utilize them wisely. And I utilize these techniques without even realizing it a lot of times with a lot of the patients and clients that I work with. So yeah, cool stuff.
How can listeners connect with you, man? Let's run down that list, like website, email, whatever information, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you got, man.
Exactly. So Instagram is Mike_Vanderplas. And online, I've got a small YouTube channel that I'm trying to put more things into, which is Viking Nurse.
Which I'll have to check out. I didn't even realize that you had that.
Yeah. I haven't put stuff up for a while on it. So I've got that. Just my Facebook account, Michael Vanderplas, the big blonde guy. I also have a few websites. So I have staystrongbook.com that just gives people the opportunity to go on there. Like I said before, also the staystrongbook.com /for Utah. They can just get that free chapter, order the book, and that will put them on my mailing list as well. My email list. They can also go to Enlightened Academy. So that's enlightened-academy.com. And that gives more information regarding the NLP trainings, the hypnosis trainings, and that stuff right there. So those are some of the different ways people can get a hold of me.
And I want to bring you back through to talk more on hypnosis and NLP sometime. Obviously today, we'll obviously to touch more on the book and kind of, as we're kind of wrapping this up, but I love the idea. I don't know a whole lot about hypnosis and I do, I find it fascinating, and that's why I'd love to chat with you sometime. Let's plan on recording another episode.
Oh, absolutely. Super cool stuff.
I love what you're doing, so I'd love to even just kind of bring you through as a reoccurring guest through here, just to catch up with you, Michael. Just because I think what you're doing is such an amazing and needed thing, and
that means the world to me.
Well, you're welcome, man. It's and that's why when you reached out to me and you were like, "Hey, man, I want to come on the podcast," I was like, "Dude, let's do it. Let's do it," because it's one of those things that the more lives we can all save, the better off we will be as a world.
Absolutely.
And I know firsthand over the last couple of years, especially since 2020 with COVID and all the isolations and being stuck at home and the world, if anything, we need it more. We need more people like you out there now, because I'm sure you've seen a lot more, suicide since 2020.
Yeah. Tons.
More anxiety, more depression. I mean, the cost of living alone
puts stress on. Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yale did a research. I mean, we're not getting into this. We're coming to the ends, but Yale did a research back in, I think it was 2004, showing that people at a lower income level of less than $34,000 a year household have a much greater incidence of suicide. People who lose their jobs, a greater incidence. There's a line in the movie, I can't remember the name of the movie. It's one of those economic downturn, 2008 destruction, real estate movies. But Brad Pitt says to these guys, he's like, shut up, because they're cheering that they made some money off of shorting the housing market. And he goes, do you realize that with every percentage point that increases the unemployment rate, that 10,000 people die? And so a lot of those are suicide rates. So when people lose their jobs, they die. And so, yeah, there's been a massive increase over these past 2 years. And unfortunately, I foreshadow in the next 10 to 20 years, Unfortunately,
the numbers are going to get higher, you think?
Especially for females.
Really?
Yeah, there's some trends that are frightening me quite a bit in regards to that. Females in the 35 to 55 range, I think it's going to increase quite a bit.
Well, I mean, we need to wrap up, but let's wrap up there. What can we do? And I know you've already given a little bit of, signs to watch out for, I guess. I mean, I guess we kind of talked about it already, but as listeners, even as myself,
okay,
what can I do? I mean, for myself, what can I do for others? What's the next best step for listeners? I guess order the book would be a good step to start there. Read the book, help others.
Yeah.
But do you have any other things you want to include there?
Yeah, I'm just going to go with like a simple 5 things daily.
Sure. Let's do that, man.
It's some of the same things that I do on some of the TV spots.
Sure.
That I do.
Yeah.
But you do these 5 things daily. And if you do all 5 of these things, your loved one does these 5 things, the possibility that they will commit suicide, I believe, I don't have research on this,
it's probably a little less.
Is a lot less.
Yeah,
These are the things that pulled me out of my darkness just about 10 years ago when I was in a really dark spot myself. And in no particular order, but basically this: do something physical. I always put that
Very
one first.
Important, yeah.
Research has shown that doing something physical, like squats, going for a walk, going for a hike, something like that.
Even push-ups, I bet, would be, sit-ups. Yeah.
Anything.
It doesn't need to be like a crazy gym workout.
No. Like working in the garden, cleaning the garage, doing any of these things. It increases the effects of what antidepressants would do.
Sure.
It's 1.25 times more effective than just taking an antidepressant. So that's 25% more than just taking an antidepressant. Interesting, huh?
Mm.
And so we had a patient a few months ago who actually did a suicide attempt in the hospital, which is rare. Mm. But they're serious when that happens. Love this patient. Will not mention his name. It's HIPAA and respect for him.
Sure.
But I would tell him frequently, I was like, you need to do some squats in front of me right now. And he had a close enough attachment to me to where he knew that I meant well for him. So do something physical. That's the biggest thing. It'll have the biggest change. You will affect more the mind by doing something physical than you would ever be able to do with your mind trying to control the mind. So do something physical. There's a lot of science behind that. We could talk about that for another hour. Do something intellectual. Learn something new.
Like a language even, I've heard is really incredible.
A language. Listen to a podcast. Yeah. Go watch a documentary.
I guess, I don't have to go so deep as in a language. I guess just something simple as a podcast. Yeah.
But if you're doing Duolingo for 20 minutes a day, And this is why learning something new, reading a book, watching a documentary, watching something on YouTube of how to change some part on your car, or whatever it is, or how
stimulates the brain.
It stimulates the brain. Well, first thing it does is you're focused on something that's not suicide. Mm. So your brain's not actively considering, okay, what's the method of how I'm going to do this? When should I do it? Around who? Away from who? So you're not thinking about it. So your brain's getting a little bit of a reprieve, so it's not thinking about it. 2, on top of that, when you learn something new, when you've done something intellectual, you feel better about yourself. Your confidence level goes up. 3rd thing I like to say is do something social. So get around other people. That could be family, could be friends. Let's say you don't have family, you don't have friends. Well, guess what? There's parks,
coffee shops.
Just get out, be around other people, and maybe just say hi to somebody. Go on a hike. We live in Utah, dang it. You're
doing something physical. You might even get around people.
Yeah. You're doing something physical. You're going to be around other people. You're going to pass people on the trail.
Yeah.
Who's a jerk on the trail? No one.
Very few people.
There
might be a couple.
There's 1 or 2. You're right about that. But
put that dog on a leash.
Yeah, exactly. But most of the time, everybody in the mountain are great.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, how's the day going? Oh, it's going great. get out there, hike. That's actually the basis of a form of therapy called EMDR. Francine Shapiro was going on a hike behind her house near Stanford. It's a form of therapy. It truly is. So do something, do something social, get out with people, go to a sporting event, go to a concert, something like that. Just being around people helps you to feel better. If your family member doesn't want to get around people, like I said, sit in the living room, go with them, sit in their room, and have them sit at the kitchen table, have them come outside. And if they don't want to talk to you, just pretend like you're both playing on your phones. Play a video game with them at home. I'm not a big video game guy, but do that.
Some people like it. Yeah.
Some people like it. Fourth thing is to do, what did I say so far? Do some work. Get some work done. And that could be, typing up something for homework. It could be typing something up for your work. It could be going to your job and putting together pieces of some little doodad. Whatever it is, it could be working on the yard. It could be working on the house. Do some kind of work, because accomplishment builds confidence. So when you finish something, it builds confidence.
I see a trend there with the confidence thing. It's all about the confidence.
Confidence is huge. Like when you feel good about yourself, when we have identity, connection, and direction, those three things, they play into each other. So when we know who we are, we have direction, we have connection with other people. When all of those things interplay with each other. The fifth and last thing that I want to say is possibly the biggest one. I'm not sure which out of these five I would say is bigger, doing something physical or this last one. Get 6 to 9 hours of sleep daily.
Which is getting harder and harder these days to do. People are like, I can get by with, I know firsthand, even me sometimes, I think I can get away with 4 hours or something.
Yeah, we think we can.
Yeah.
We think we can.
Catches up with you.
Yeah, it does. Matthew Walker, I believe is his name. Research scientist out of, he's originally out of England, but is at Berkeley right now. He wrote a book called Why We Sleep. He points out that the percentage of people, if we were to round it to the nearest whole number, the percentage of people who can operate non-affected with less than 6 hours of sleep, and we were to round that to the nearest whole number, that number would be 0. So I
believe it. Yeah.
I know myself. There's a lot of times where I've thought, oh man, I've been all cocky. I was like, 4 hours of sleep, I'm fine. No, with me, perfect is around 6.5 hours. Some people need more. My wife needs 9, So get that sleep, because it helps to literally wash out the adenosine in our brain and helps us to heal mentally and physically. And when we have physical stress on our body, that pulls from our mental ability as well. And so there's been times, like a few years ago, it was about 2 years ago, I was really tired. I was finishing a shift. Some suicidal thoughts started popping in my brain. And I just realized, I was like, Mike, get home. You've got this and this and this and this to do. But none of those things matter. What you need to do more than anything is get home, take a shower, go to sleep. Sleep. If we didn't need it for our survival, we would have done away with it in evolution years ago.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason. We need sleep. I personally think if we wanted to revamp the entire United States healthcare system for it to work better, it would focus on sleep.
More doctors just need to give a prescription of sleep. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, like if they would, I'm not belittling or saying we don't need some of these medications, but imagine if more doctors were even just saying that, like, hey, you know what, Chris, you need a few more hours of sleep. Yeah. Here, I'm going to write a note telling you to get sleep. Yeah.
One of the best doctors I've ever had, I was telling her about pain and stuff like this and some different things that were problems with me. She talked to me for a half an hour, which doctors don't do nowadays. And she's like, okay, the biggest thing is you need to get more sleep. And then we'll get you on like hormone replacement too and stuff like this. But the biggest thing is you need to sleep. And so she prescribed me like a light sleeping pill for a little bit. I don't use it anymore, but she gave me a lot of tips that I thought that I knew, but she gave me even more tips.
And now you're like, Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you so much for coming and recording tonight. I mean,
thanks for having me.
It's been better than I even thought it would be. Not that I thought it would be bad, but I mean, I'm always blown away when I have just an amazing conversation.
Thanks, brother.
You're welcome. And I'm serious. Let's get you back on soon.
Yeah.
And let's talk more. I mean, I'm sure there's even a lot more, routes, because I want to read the book, and then obviously we could talk more about the book. We could talk more about hypnosis. We can talk more about what you're doing.
Sleep?
Actually, what I think, because you said you're going to Germany in September.
Yeah.
Let's talk when you get back.
Let's do
because
that. Yeah.
Because I think it could be really fun to talk about your trip to Germany and maybe some impact that you made over there.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Let's plan on that.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to, any final words or thoughts or things that you were hoping we would get a chance to talk about while the record button's still going? I know we gave the websites and address, and I'll have all of those in the show notes for the podcast too. And let's go buy the book. Let's support Michael. Let's support this cause.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. But anything else you want to add?
I think the one thing I'd say is just this: is if you are listening to this and you're considering it, there's one or two, maybe three things that I want to say. One is, please notice that your life is not just your life.
Yeah.
Your life is intertwined to the other people, whether you think that they would do better in life without you or not, they will not. The pain that is left when people leave, when people commit suicide, is something that takes decades or an entire life to get over, and many people never do. So don't think that your life is not your own. And two, if you're considering doing it today, there's always tomorrow.
Amen.
You can always do it tomorrow. So just those are the two biggest things that I can say is you can always do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow you can do it the day after that. And then the day after that. And sometimes you just need to get through some of the rough patches in order for you to see the true beauty that is life right now. My life is amazing right now. I love my life so much. And I think if I would have taken it,
and I bet you're grateful you're here. I
Yeah.
mean, you're like, holy cow, I'm glad that I didn't follow through.
Yeah. And how many people would be dead from me not nursing, me not giving this book out? I mean, if you're listening to this and you're considering your own death, I mean, you don't know. You may affect and save somebody else's life and never know it. So,
and if you ever need someone to talk to, reach out to me. Seriously. I mean, if reach out on Instagram, give me a call, shoot me a text, whatever, sometimes we just need people to talk to. And I want my audience to know that I'm a safe set of ears or a friend. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. My mind is a little blank with. I know there's probably a better word to use there, but please reach. And the same thing I would imagine for Michael too.
Yeah,
I mean, reach out to him.
If you get the book, there's email there and contact info in there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Many, many thanks again to Michael Vanderplas for joining me on this episode of the podcast. What a great conversation. I am serious when I say this. I am so grateful that I brought him into the Red Sign podcast studio here to record this podcast with him. Not only was it a great conversation, but I feel like I created an awesome friendship with him, bringing him in here. I mean, what a great guy. Seriously, support him. Reach out to him. Let him know you heard him on the podcast. And reach out to me. Let me know your thoughts of the podcast. I'd love to get your feedback and hear what you guys have to say. If you're interested in coming on the podcast, if any questions that you might have, reach out to me. Shoot me a text message. My phone number is 801-244-2908. I'd love to talk with you. And as always, if you are moving to the state of Utah, if you're moving across town, hit up my website, support our show sponsor, Red Sign Team, the Red Sign Real Estate Team. My website is chris.redsign.com. If you are searching for homes here in Utah, again, chris.redsign.com. Head on over to that website, check it out. Love you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.